Well, hello, everyone. Surprise, surprise. Here is another special video just in time for Bob's birthday. I was going to save this video for next week, but what the heck? Look at this monster canvas 24 by 36, gallery wrapped. This is that kind of canvas that has that inch and a half wide bit there. No frame ever needed for this. It looks great on its own. And so I have myself in fast motion here. All right. I didn't think you'd want to see 3 or 4 minutes of just spreading liquid white. So here we are in, a little bit of double time. Wearing the floppy hat, seeing a little bit of me today. I had to have the camera a little further back to capture this monster canvas. So, a couple extra surprises in store for you with this painting here. First off, we got to get that whole thing covered. So I'm using a big old 2-inch brush, spreading this liquid white out into a very thin film. Lots and lots of scrubbing there. And the great thing is I turn my head to the side. Look at that. I wore out my right arm here. I had to switch over to my left. It's a lot of real estate there. And just keep moving, sliding that paint. You want just that very, very thin coat, or things can get a little soupy on you, especially today's fluffy clouds. Less liquid white, the better. I give up my canvas a light touch, and I just want to see that thin fingerprint. And once again, I messed up, and here we are with a voiceover video. It really is easier with my setup here, and sometimes things happen like, oh gosh, a delivery man arrives, or the dog starts barking at a piece of dust or something. So here we go. I was able to trim the video down and do a couple of special effects without, and then I do the voiceover. So, little bit of a combination of phthalo blue and Prussian blue, and putting in a nice old sky today. Vigorous crisscross strokes, just working that paint right into the fabric. And as we do here, you reload the brush as often as you need, working from the top down, let it pick up that liquid white. And the idea is you want it a little lighter as you work your way down to the horizon. Having those corners a little darker draws the eye into the painting. So, when you're working with a big canvas here, everything is, well, multiplied. You got to load the brush more, a lot more working it. The concepts and the steps are the same. They're just on a little bigger scale. This is about as big as I like to go with my canvases. I've done some bigger. I've done a 4 by 5 foot canvas a couple of times. It's not my favorite thing to do. Um, Basically, it's because I'm spending too much time on it. Once I cross an hour and a half or so, things start to get a little well, a little exhausting. I like to do my paintings in one session. Now, some people might put their brushes away and come back to it, and that's completely fine. I just have my own preferences here. So I'm down just about halfway or so. I might add a little bit more color to the corners, darken things up a little bit, clean out my brush completely, and then we'll start going over it with a clean, dry brush to fill in those lighter areas if you want to, take out all the little brush marks and so forth. You got to take a couple of extra steps back to evaluate the canvas here. It always looks a little weird up close, not like it does from a few feet away. So you got to take a moment or two and assess. I might have done so and decided to really darken up that corner. Working from the corner and I'm bringing it down. You see how it gets just a little deeper shade of blue as I bring it in. A little more fade, a little more action happening up in the right corner here. Maybe I should have fast motioned this part. Once I get into the fiddling, you might want to try just make it the way you like it. A little more up there. A lot of the sky is getting covered up, so I don't need to really overwork it. Focusing on a little bit more Prussian blue. I think I got to put in some water. I'm gonna have a little bit of water action in our scene here today, and pushing a little harder here. There's looked like there was a spot or two at the very bottom where I didn't hit it with enough liquid white. So pushing, bending those bristles and start working some of that color from the bottom up. Just like the top down, we want the bottom to be a little bolder than the horizon. So I always like to start from the bottom, work my way up, and looking for some general horizontal shapes here, little horizontal strokes. Keep that water looking nice and flat. The harder you push, the more you'll move and blend, really bending those bristles. And if you use the brush sideways, you get a little more pressure. If you're using the full width of the brush, vertical style, you can do more per stroke, but it's just a little harder to get the paint off. I like to alternate the two, get it out there the way I like it, and having light areas and dark areas, it's totally fine. I try to leave a little bit of a gap there between the sky and the water. It's not absolutely necessary, but when we're trying to make a misty effect, it's nice to have a little open, blank, white area there. There we go. Fiddling around. The old flappy hat doing its work here today. I've got several studio lights shining on this canvas, and they can get a little warm. And of course, it's a workout on this big old canvas here, so the hat helps. All right, look at that messy old brush. So there is the base of our color. Nice background color of sky and water. And what is going to be the next step? Do I have a little bit of blending to do? Or are we going to call it good? So, actually, I just cleaned out my brush thoroughly with paint thinner, beat it against the beater rack, clean the excess paint off with a paper towel, paint thinner, I should say. And now working from the center up, we're going to do our final blends here. Take out any brush marks. And look at that, just knocking the extra paint off. Give it some nice long even strokes to bring it all together. And a couple of final long strokes. This is a long stretch. That's going to take all of my arm length there. So there we go. Now, we got ourselves plenty of color out onto the canvas here. Onto the palette, I should say. Boy, we're going to put in some big old fluffy clouds with our fan brush. And as we do, we load up that brush full of color. Got a bunch of different fan brushes here. Should we use the small brush? I think we're gonna try to use a big old mega brush, the large number 6 fan brush. Lots of paint up in there. Loading and smoothing. Plenty of paint. We're going to have to load our brush a number of times with the size of this canvas and the fluffy level of the clouds we're looking for. So, big old line of clouds. Here we go. Anytime now. Using the corner of the brush, just pushing that paint on in a circular motion and keeping the brush moving. Don't want to stir and blend in this stage. It's just getting some paint off. Look at that. It does dirty up your brush. So before going back into the white, just knock the extra off on a paper towel there. There, now I strengthen that area up. Bring that cloud a little further to the left. A little bit more paint, but I try not to mix it and blend and soften it right in this step. See how we have a nice distinct outside edge? That's important when we're making these clouds. But the rest of the cloud, we blur and soften downwards. We want to blend the bottom edge of that cloud using just the tips of the bristles and barely touching the canvas. I blur and soften the bottom edge. The harder you push or the more you go over it, you can eventually just blend the cloud into nothing. Okay. Try to avoid hitting that top edge, and the cloud's going to be fluffy. Again, when you step back, it looks so much better. Here comes the fluffing, the hypnotizing motion Bob does. The handle way up high, and just the lightest touch with the beveled edge. Look at that lifting, fluffing motion. Light, light, light. I'm missing about 2 out of the 3 strokes I do. That's how light we hit it. You watch Bob or you watch me doing this, you think I'm hitting it every single stroke? Oh no. Very, very light. So that cloud is done. And we, instead of fiddling with the same cloud, let's make another. It's such a muscle memory trick here. Once you do a few of these, it starts to become a little more natural of a motion, pushing some of that white paint on. And if you've ever seen a Bob painting in person or you've done a few of these yourself, it's a lot of thick white paint. I mean, it's sticking on top of that blue. It's not super flush with the canvas. It's thick. That's what makes it bright and fluffy looking, having that thickness of the paint doing the work. So, one cloud at a time works most efficiently. If you try to put all your clouds in and then blend them all, it can be a little tough. There's some episodes there where you see Bob really have to try to sneak the brush in there if he's made too many clouds at one time. And that can be difficult the first few times you try it. So, not impossible once you have a little experience with the tools and the paint, but for best results, especially when starting out, just try one cloud at a time. I think it'll work better for you. light touch, finding the correct angle and the correct pressure. So important. If you pull a little bit up, should have zoomed in on that. When I show you the mountains, here, spoiler alert, I did put a zoom in here, so hopefully we'll be able to see the clouds a little closer when I zoom in. Doggone it, now I ruined the surprise. Well, if you're barely paying attention, this will still be a surprise. How about that? Or you're watching with the sound off, which is understandable. So we do have a long video here. You got me for a little bit. Maybe you're going to skip around. Maybe not. I'm going to talk my way through the whole thing, assuming you're going to watch the whole thing. So get used to it. Look at that baby cloud. Now that looked like a big cloud on a small canvas. Once again, blending down, fluffing up, and then a couple of finishing strokes as needed. And we have something going on. Look at how that small cloud, right over a spot of the sky that's a little deeper blue. It creates more of a contrast, doesn't it? Couple of hairs, gotta zing those out of the brush. Pretty easy there. Now here comes the fiddling. Try not to fiddle too much. Sneaking a little cloud above. Now that's the same thing as I talked about with doing too many clouds at once. It's another tip for you. Try to only work your way downwards. You see, when I working up and trying to put a cloud above, or in this case between two clouds, it can be a little tricky. You just have to have a little more precision in your strokes as to not wipe out a cloud that's behind something, so, or below something. Just wanted to get a couple more little mini clouds perhaps in there just to fill in some of the dead space. Now, let's see here. It looks like I'm using a little bit of Mountain Mix. That's a color in the Bob Ross line of paints. It's basically all the colors Bob typically mixes in: crimson, black, blue, and brown, already pre-mixed for you. And I'm adding a little bit of white to it. We're going to put in a couple of different mountains here. So this mountain in the background is going to have a little bit of white in it to give it a lighter feel, lighter in value, which makes it look further away. The lighter it is, the further away it will look. Using my palette knife, I just want to push that paint right into the fabric and make a basic mountain shape. Still pretty dark. There's a number of ways you can do this and the number of brightness levels that you can play around with. This is going to look definitely further away than our main mountain. But I could have easily gone a lot lighter. And what I'm doing is just creating a nice distinct outer edge and then scraping off the excess paint. You can push it in firmly or slide the knife, whatever gives you a clean edge, and then I pull inwards a little bit, getting a little color down from the outer edge. Maybe add a little bump here or there so it's not just like a pyramid shape. Gotta give little peaks and interesting outer shapes there. Scraping downwards. So we'll have a little bit of paint to move, not a lot, just a little bit of dark color. And as you know here, that liquid white is going to do most of the work for us. Spreading that color down. I'm going to use the big old brush here. This again, angle and pressure. Push a little harder and slide that brush right along the top edge first. And then using the paint that you pick up, boom, fill in, and it creates a faded effect. It builds the mountain out and gives it the illusion of mist at the bottom, a little bit of fadedness. Look at that. That little bit of paint, you can build out this mountain, make it quite a bit bigger than you originally think it is. We use that knife and scrape in some of that color, makes a mountain look kind of small. But you push and slide that paint and you can build it to great heights. Pushing a little harder here and just finding the angles. A little bit of paint to the left, a little bit of paint to the right creates the highlights and shadows. Push it out a little bit more and slide that paint, always fading it at the bottom. All right, here we go. Now, I don't necessarily want super great detail on my distant mountain, so I'm going to show you here with a little bit of zoom. Look at that, I added just a touch of my mountain mix, make it a little bit off-white. A little bit off-white, not super bright. And I know this is going to be tough to see, so bang, zoom. I'm just going to lay a little bit of this color on. Not trying to go for super thick chunkiness like we normally do on a big mountain. Very little color. And allow the knife to kind of rub it on. Look at that, a little thick there. A little thick there, but that's okay. I'm going to take care of that in just a moment. Little bit of a stretch, kind of sliding it down. I usually caution my students on our big old mountains not to try to spread downwards. Now I'm using a clean knife, holding the knife very, 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 very flat. And look how it rubs the paint. I'm letting it pick up that dark undercolor, the background color, and just rubbing some of that highlight right into the scene, right down there, and it darkens things. I can add a little color, and then with the clean knife, I wipe my knife here, rub it on, a little bit of color, and then rub it in until you get the degree of softness that you're going for. If it's a little too bright, just rub, 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 rub. And it's less detail. Okay, not great amount of color here. We'll get into that, I promise. So I wanted to show you that in zoom form here so you can kind of see the technique where we can make it just not so distinct. And mixing up, I wish I had 6 cameramen around showing you my palette, showing you how I load my knife and my brush. I'm going to use the small edge of my knife and put a little bit of highlight on the right parts of these bumps and lumps. Give this mountain a little extra detail. And if you add just a touch of blue to your highlight color, we can make little indications of shadows, pulling some down the opposite direction. In my scene here, my highlights are on the right side. My shadows are going to be going on the left side. Those different angles is what creates the perspective that this is a 3D object. Even on this little bump there on the right side, creating a little shadow side, rubbing it in so it's not so bright. When you're looking at this painting from a decent distance, you won't see a great deal of this color. It just looks like a little indication. But when you get up close, you'll start to see, oh my gosh, how did he do that? How did he paint every individual little crack and crevice? We don't. It just gives that illusion. Rubbing that paint, leaving some of it alone, leaving some of it brighter, leaving some of it duller, creates that effect. And it looks like, you spent 15 hours painting this. Nope. Just a hair under 2 hours is all that this particular painting takes. And adding a little bit of extra bright, maybe up here on the edges. It's about all the fiddling I'm going to do. That's it. Bring a little bit of a sweeping motion from the bottom up, mists it out even more. And look at that mountain just fades off at the bottom, fades off into nothing. All right, I think we're about done with the zoom here. A little bit of tap, 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 a little bit of sweep, sweep, sweep. Add some extra little bit of mist, and there we go. Ooh, I'm so glad I did that zoom. It really helps. One more thing now that we took a step back. Do you see how the mountain overlaps some of your clouds, pushes those clouds a little further away? There we go. Perspective, depth and distance. Hallmarks here of a nice painting. Get rid of that some of that excess paint. We don't need that off-white color anymore. See how we got a nice bright color again? I don't know why I'm prepping it right now, but there we go. So we're on to the big old foreground mountain, so to speak, our closer mountain, our bigger mountain. So, large palette knife, bringing down our mountain mixture. The idea is we're always overlapping a little bit of the previous steps. So normally I would just start at the top. And sometimes when I start at the top, I miss my overlapping. So just creating a little distinct overlapping first makes my life a little easier, makes me a little happier, gives me a little more control of where to put this mountain. Normally I just follow Bob and just start from the top and work my way down. But today I needed a little bit of precision. So look how I overlap that mountain. I have to overlap a certain portion of it for it to look right in my eyes, creating a little bit of mist separating the background mountain and the foreground one. So that's what I did first. You feel free to knock this mountain in. But I tell you, these big canvases, it can get Well, it is. It's a little harder than the smaller canvas. Now I'm feeling comfortable, except I think you see the slow realization that maybe my clouds were a little low and I'm going to lose some of them. And laying some of this dark paint on a thick white cloud makes it a little harder. If you find that the color isn't dark enough, I literally scrape some of that cloud off and then lay in my dark color. Bringing that down, creating my little lumps and bumps down the right side of this mountain range here. I need some more paint. Same process as before, putting that color on in a nice distinct outer edge, bringing some color down, scraping off the excess. I'm really focusing on that right side. I'm not sure why. It looks fine as is. And there I go. Now I got to push some more paint up here in the main tallest peak. And let's put a little bump there on the left side. Bring it right on off the left side of the canvas. It's all right. Doing a little bit of cleanup here on a bigger canvas. It's a little easier to see these little extra bits out there on the outer edge. Whoa, hello. There's an edit for you. Too late now. Got my voiceover going here. It'll be okay. So, we're going to start bringing that color out same way as we did before. That's the cool thing about this is once we do it the one mountain here, the next mountain goes a little easier because we've had a little practice. I'm going to push that mountain color, bringing it right down to my horizon area, the little separator bit between the sky and the water. And hopefully you'll see here, since we didn't add any white to our mountain color, do you see how it looks distinctly darker than the background mountain? It's all by design. Pushing that color. Some of it's going to the right, some of it's going to the left. Fading it out. I love this effect here. I love the fact that you could get away with a lot of this not even being highlighted. Just the strokes that you're putting in here builds out the highlight side and the shadow side. Pushing firmly, moving that color down. And the liquid white is doing its job, creating that misty layer at the base. Bringing this down one little section at a time. So, Build out our mountain. Now it's time to do a little more precision work as needed. Clean up those edges if they're bugging you. Trying not to fiddle it to death. Gives you a nice blueprint of where your highlights and shadow colors are going to be with the knife. And here we go. Look at this. A little bit more fiddling than I expected, than I remember here. This painting is up on my wall right now. Making things a little darker so the white highlights come off a little more distinct. And here we go. Now in this particular painting, I do things a little bit different. A lot of times when I'm making my mountains, I do all the highlights, then all the shadows, and then start working back and forth. You're going to see here that I'm going to put in the highlights, then shadow, and working my way from the right side to the left side, alternating a little more frequently between highlights and shadows. Either way is valid. You do what you like. Maybe I should have zoomed in a little bit more on this one here. Maybe I can. I think that was the squeak of my chair you just heard. Let's see about this. And there we go. Little extra zoom for you here for the next couple of minutes. Showing you how I very gently lay this white on. Reloading your knife as often as you need to. This time here, we're not going to spread and blend the color like I did with the background mountain. Notice how I pivot that knife, letting the bottom edge, I like to call it the heel of the knife, that bottom corner, that's what follows the edge of the mountain. And laying these little pathways in, pivoting the knife, creating a wedge shape. And as you need to, spread out more paint, always having a nice clean roll on your knife. Now when you're Bob, sure, just wipe the knife, or don't wipe the knife. I always like to have a clean knife. Ever since I began painting and teaching, I always like to have a clean knife before I get a roll of paint on it. Just helps me see what I'm doing. Lightest touch, laying that color on. Now my shadow color, once I get going here, is just white with a little bit of the blue color in it. You could dull or gray it down a little bit with your background mountain shade as you desire. There we go. We got a nice little indication of highlights on here. And I think here under the zoom or behind the zoom, you can't really see what I'm doing here because I zoomed. I'm mixing up that shadow color. But we got a nice bird's eye view here of laying that shadow side on. So I'm mixing up a very thin spread of color. Get a small roll of color on the knife. I know. What's going to be easier for you to see? The color I'm creating, there you can see it, or being able to see this monster canvas. So I did what I could. I'm kind of splitting the difference here. Hopefully you can see what I got going on here. I'm pulling a little bit down. I know this is going to be a little hard to see. I can't believe I'm editing on the fly here. Pulling a little bit of color down. The idea is making a little distinct, distant form. Little ridge way off in the distance. And then rubbing it into the scene. Now here is where we find a little more typical stroke. Getting that color right up, butting up against the highlight. And you got to figure out what edge of the knife works for you, either the long edge or the short edge. Sneaking a little bit back there. Then you reload the knife, find the bottom edge. There it is. Laying it out, finding an angle here that spreads, and try not to cover the highlight side. And even on this side here, sneaking it in. There it is. This is a first, a very special thing. As I'm doing my voiceover, I'm watching my video in my software here, and I'm moving the picture at the same time. Hopefully, it's not too jarring. I've never I've never done this before on a video, but for you guys, I'm willing to try. There it is, cleaning up this little edge here, laying on the shadows. I don't think we have too much more zoom left in this scene here. Ooh, I predicted it just right. Now I'm bringing the shadow a little bit down and hopefully in front of that background ridge. Little bit more in there. Then you see I have this little bump in front of that. Working my way one little section at a time. It's more of a little scoop or a swirl or a little stroke. Here we go. Boy, I do a little fiddling now and again. Just enough to get the effect, and then we try to leave it alone. Here we go. Let's unzoom now. In just a moment. There we go. Bringing this one down, this new peak. You could call this the tallest peak or the main peak, perhaps. Little more paint, laying it down and out. And as soon as we come away from the zoom, it's like stepping back a few feet, right? You start to see it looks so much different, and dare I say, a little better than than when it's right up next to your nose here. So I've jumped ahead just a little bit to show you. I laid a little bit more color on, just getting this highlight on the right side here, and even this little bump, I give a little swirl motion here, just a little bit of a curve, a little swoosh, putting a little bit of highlight, working my way down this side. And of course, moving right along to the shadow. There's a number of angles you can do. You turn the knife upside down, you find the right amount of pressure. Now, when I mean angles, it's not just, where the knife is, 12 o'clock, or turning the knife all the way down to 6 o'clock, but it's also the angle that you're holding it towards the canvas the other way, where that roll of paint is. You can have a very scrapey effect, holding the angle up almost straight in. You can have the angle quite flat to the canvas. I hope that makes sense. Holding that knife a certain way, depending on where the paint is on the blade and how much you might have left of that roll, you change the angle towards the canvas the other way. So it's a it's a bit of a, well, practice. You get an understanding of where the knife is in relation to the canvas and where the roll of paint is on your knife, and it just starts becoming second nature the more you do it. Sometimes on these monster mountains, you're forced to remake your color. So you get practice in color matching. And we're just going to keep working back and forth, highlights and shadows, getting some little streaks of color in your rolls of paint so it's not so boring. And I think for the sake of brevity, I'm going to speed up a little bit of this section so you can see me laying this on, and I don't have to just keep rambling on or having a bunch of dead air either. So you can always pause, and if you're painting along with me. But I add these little bits of highlight, little ridges sticking out, and then immediately coming in and putting a shadow there, alternating back and forth. Look at that. Everything happens a little quicker, just so you can see the finished result that much faster. And coming back here, adding little extra bits. Got some empty dark background color remaining over here. Back when I had zoomed in, I didn't go all the way down. So making up there, you can see a much easier effect of me making my shadow color. And we have some empty background section here. So I'm going to use the white first, bring that highlight a little further down the scene. And with any new highlight, we got to have its own private shadow. So there we go. Coming up to the end of the fast motion here, so if it's bugging you and you haven't skipped ahead, it's ending pretty soon. But look how I just built that mountain even further, just by bringing it a little lower. Makes that mountain just extra big. All right, back to normal speed now, and doing a lot more fiddling. This mountain is 3 times normal size, so it does take a bit longer. Working back and forth, getting little bits of those shadows snuck in between the little layers of highlights. And here's where we add an extra little special thing, a whole new peak. If you have a nice empty spot in your mountain background, well, put in a whole new section, a whole new ridge in front. Follow the process. Highlights go in one direction, shadows going a slightly different direction, and it just works. It's how we create those 3D effects. So here we continue. I had to take a little break from my voiceover, have some lunch. This one's gonna be a while. So, golly, let's hopefully we're done with this mountain soon. And one last step to do, creating our misty mist at the bottom here. So notice how I'm holding my brush at a slight angle. I'm not stabbing straight in, but have the handle a little bit below, so I'm tapping it with that beveled edge. That's I find it works best for me. Tappa, 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 and then sweep, sweep from the bottom up. Create some of that lovely tapping effects. And then at the very bottom of that mist, I'm just cleaning up and letting it fade into the water. Just the very top part of the water. Don't fret too much about it. A lot of it's getting covered up. So, what we're going to do now is I'm going to take some of that mountain mixture. And I do believe here, just to be on the safe side, I'm going to load a little bit more paint onto the palette. It's a big old canvas here. We're going to need plenty of paint. There it is. Even add a touch of blue to it, maybe a touch of brown to it, and a little bit of green. Loosely mix it together, no big deal. We gotta jump forward a couple of miles here. Those mountains, we need them to look far away. So We'll make a darker effect here with our background trees, a line of trees way off in the distance, and just knocking some of that excess paint off my brush. And it looks like I cleaned the brush with some paint thinner, so I always make sure to have it very dry. As you see, I held it in the paper towel there for a moment. Wicks off a lot of that extra. Now, just like the clouds, we're going to load plenty of color in the brush. Load lots of color in the brush, and we're going to get it off by chopping downwards. Look at all that paint. My rule of thumb is where the paint is, you shouldn't see the individual bristles of that fan. So lots of paint, but nice and smooth. And I'm chopping downwards, really bending the bristles vertically. That's what gets the paint off. The top half of the brush is doing most of the work. Creating the effect of these distant trees. They're all somewhat connected at the bottom. And what I'm talking about here is this little chopping upwards, creating what I call a little stair step. So I chop up and then I chop down. One stroke makes one tree. Do you see how it has a little step effect there? And then using the brush there, I just tap in the middle just to fill it in. So we have some little spiky looking tops to it, and then a little bit of paint in the middle just to build out the rest of the line. Overlap a little bit of the previous step, so I'm tapping some of that tree line right over the base of the mountain. Reload your brush often to keep it nice and dark, relatively so. I mean, it's going to change when I'm tapping over some of that white paint. It will lighten some of it up, and that's okay. You can always load more paint into your brush, tap a little harder. What you don't want to do is just keep tapping the same spot over and over. And as your brush runs out of paint, that's when the colors really start mixing and melting together. I like to avoid that if at all possible. In my scene here, I'm going all the way across. I started a little higher on the right side, and eventually it lowers a little bit. Just creates a fun effect. Sometimes I plan it out. I put a couple of fence posts in like that, and then I fill in between. Another way to get that stair step effect. Trees taller and shorter and wider and skinnier, and all sorts of variation there. So when you have it all mashed across there, you get some interesting tops, and you fill in the gaps if there are any. Then we'll go on to the next step. What will it be? You know what's going to happen. We bash the heck out of the bottom of it, and we turn the bottom of these trees into mist using the paint that's already there. And it mixes into the liquid white, which is always there from the start. Those colors mash together and it creates that illusion of mist. No muss, no fuss. Keep going, back and forth. Keep the brush moving. I have this little pattern I start doing here, a little bit forward, always forward, but I go back a little bit and then go forward, kind of like that. One step back, two steps forward, one step back, two steps forward. And I find it creates the mist for me just the way I like it. Okay. You can rotate or pivot your brush a little so you're not putting too much residue under there. Look at that nice little curve I got going on there. And of course, you can bash the heck out of it. Keep on bashing until you get the level and lightness of your mist. Clean your brush now and again. If you find yourself picking up extra paint, it only takes a second to knock the extra paint out of your brush. And look at that. Bashing out the misty area even more creates that effect. Super soft, super fun. I try to give the whole canvas a once over here before going over any one spot multiple times. And then with the lightest little cloud fluff maneuver, I lift from the bottom up just to take off some of those tap marks. Make sure the mist looks super soft. And then I go back if needed. At the very bottom of this mist, you might see me do a little bit of a, there it is, a little bit of a blend just to soften the rest. Now, depending on your scene here, I put in a little indication of a second layer of these spiky trees. Maybe not all the way across, but if you have a little bit of a taller first layer, you see how my right side is a bit taller? I can put another layer in, overlapping quite a bit of the first layer, leaving a little bit of mist in between the two. Boy, oh boy, create that effect so easily. Adds a little bit more depth, a new plane, so to speak. Tapping down to create the misty layer, fluffing up, just as we did before. Now with a little bit of that mountain mixture on my 2-inch brush, I just want to knock in the background, the dark background of my grass. So the idea is just making a little wedge shape here with some darker color. It's that mountain mix with a touch of the brown and green in it. And this is just all the deep shadows and such in the grass. Now, if you saw my last video, it was a fairly light shadow, just a little bit of blue. And then I just tapped in the highlights. This is a bit darker and hopefully creates a more, well, a deeper contrast. So, a touch of the liquid white, I pull some color into the bristles, give it a little wiggle and a pull, a little jiggle and a pull. Tint it with some phthalo green, it looks like, phthalo green, and maybe a touch of sap green. Either works. Pulling some color down, maybe a little Indian yellow, find the flavor, so to speak, and then tap some paint right up on the tips of those bristles. I call it step one and step two. Load the brush smooth and then tap a little ridge of paint and you're good to go. Find the angle and the pressure and tap and move. At some point here, I lost the floppy hat, didn't I? Coming back to the right and tapping to the left, bringing that forward in the scene. Just the more you tap it, the more the highlight mixes with the shadow and it can get duller. So if it's too bright, sure, keep tapping it. But at some point, you might be getting a little too much mixture and it will just kind of all disappear and appear a little muddy. Bringing this out. And there we go. Rather simple. One of the big things I try to instill in my students is don't overwork it. Don't think it's more than it needs to be. It's just an indication of highlights, and then we move right on. If you need it a little brighter, see how I just made my color just a little brighter yellow and tapped it in. Now I take a little bit of the Van Dyke brown on my fan brush. This is not very detailed. It's still kind of far away, so I don't need a lot of detail. To help create that not a lot of detail, I use the fan brush. Um, we'll often use the knife to lay some color on a little thicker. I find that works best in the foreground, where you want it to look a little bolder, a little rockier almost. But back here, the fan brush just gives it a smoother, more distant feel, in my opinion. Not super worried about the leftmost side. I think I'm planning on getting that covered up, so don't need to worry about it too much. A little touch of dark sienna and white, graze it over the dark for an indication of highlights. If it's a little too strong, a simple graze over with a clean 1-inch brush will soften it, push it down, make it to whatever degree of softness you like. Now, we could have done this step before, or we could have waited, but I'm just going to pull down some of that mountain mixture, the dark grass color, and create some reflection. Do we need a reflection? No. Does it look awesome? Oh, yeah. So it's really up to you if you want to do this step or not. It certainly works with or without it. And then using my clean 2-inch brush, I start stretching some of that color down. Brush it sideways. Boy, it does look better. I always like the reflections, you know? Really helps sell the effect. Now, a couple of spots, I accidentally, go over your earth, a little bit of the brown there, so you can just clean it right back up. Super simple. This is a very forgiving medium, so you are able to go on over it. It's not going to dry for several days, so it's fine going over it. You still get that mixability. Now, if you've watched your Bob or you've watched me, there's always a little bit of cleanup here and there. I like putting a little bit of this grass overlapping the dark brown. Again, there's a number of ways you can do this step. I could have put the earth, the browns and the dark siennas, on first before I even started the highlights of the grass. Or do it first, and then you just have to come back and sneak a little bit of grass over the top edge of the dirt, the earth. Either way, it works. I love this technique because there's so many different ways to do it and a couple of different orders to do it in. Now I'm taking a little bit of off-white, titanium white, and just a touch of the brown, and we'll cut in our waterline, a very small roll, touching and sawing while moving, and it paint just kind of squirts out the edge there. I always caution my students about making it too bold. It will kind of ruin the effect if you overload it. Subtle is the watchword. Subtle. This painting is really starting to come together. We still have a bit of time left, according to the old clock here. Quite a bit of time. This is a long video. This video is going to be something like 5 times as long as my last video. All because we're using a canvas that's about 5 times bigger. Maybe not 5 times bigger, but definitely a lot bigger. I think it's time for our happy little trees. Using the corner of the brush, I'm tapping down, letting those bristles bend to create a little branch shape. And right here you can see the one of my one of my golden pieces of advice. If there's something about a step you don't like, we can always cover it up. We call them the happy accidents. So we don't make mistakes, we just have happy accidents. Once we make a individual tree or two, you assess. You take a moment, you step back. Where do you want these trees? How many of these trees do you want? Where should they be? You can see here, I have a plan in mind, but the plan quite often goes out the window when I'm right in the middle of painting. I have an idea and change it. Bringing down a basic shape. Probably the hardest part is to realize that a lot of this is getting covered up. I push up at the base of the trees to give it a little bit of a grassy feel, little bits of the bristles bending will create an effect. So I'm tapping down to build the tree, pushing up to create some underbrush. Looks like here comes tree number 3. Little baby tree. A little bit of fiddling just to make sure that it's down there and make the correct shape. And then it looks like I'm going to use a new fan brush just to have a dark brush and a light brush. Dark background brush and a highlighting brush. A little bit of the liquid white, a little bit of cadmium yellow, and a little bit of sap green. Look at that. Not very much liquid white. And to get paint off, look at how I do, just like I did with the grass. I load it full of color and then a little bit of push just to get a little tiny bit up on the tips of those bristles. Helps it come off a little easier. And with a light touch, I start working with the corner of the brush on the top and work my way down. I am going to use my knife to create an indication of that little one hair stalk. Lots of little taps. All about the angle and the pressure. Once again, I find myself repeating myself. You're probably getting sick of me saying it. I get it. But it's very important. Find the angle and pressure that work, and then repeat yourself over and over and over again. There we go. And once I get that tree just perfect, well, you got to hit it a couple more times, right? Now it's extra perfect, if that's a word. All right, so we're going to put in a little bit more of our foreground, really jumping ahead now. Building this tree down. Look how I just overlap that space where that little wedge of land ends. Building out some more trees. And here we go. We're going to be making some bigger trees here. On a smaller canvas, these things would just be stretching from the top to the bottom, but on a bigger canvas, they just don't look as big, do they? Now I'm liking to leave a little space between this tree and those two other trees next to them on the right. That's going to help us create a little, just a little distant pathway kind of heading off into the background. Couple of little trees, always vary the size and shape. Making them pretty much just dark. That's all it needs to be. So, pushing up on the 1-inch brush, I just have a little bit of that same dark color. Boy, it's such a Such a versatile shade, right? It's just all the darks. You can make trees and grasses and bushes and much, much more. Without the green in it, that's what we use for the mountains. What a great color. Pushing up, really bend those bristles, and it creates that vertical grass. Looks like things are growing upwards. Maybe even a little right in between those trees. A little background, a little bush shining out, all that undergrowth. That's the word. One thing that you're not seeing here is that this canvas is that gallery wrapped. It's like a good inch and a half, maybe even more. It's a really deep canvas. And what I did after the end here, after the end of the video, I actually came back the next day, um, and I did a little bit of color matching. Here I am just highlighting these trees. And I actually painted the sides and the top and the bottom, the edges. Okay, I could do the sides whilst the canvas was still on the easel, and I just color matched since we're all, just using that same line of paints. It's quite easy just to find the right shades here to extend the mountains around the side of the canvas. And on the other side and on the top, of course, I continued the clouds. I painted the top and the sides and the bottom all blue to match the sky and water. And then, of course, on the sides, I wrapped those trees around just by tapping and making a new tree on the left side there. And wrapped the clouds up around the top. I wrapped the distant line of tree tops around the side and brought the grass and land and the little water line, everything. And just made the whole thing wrap around. So, anyone, should they decide to purchase this at some point in the future, we'll be able to just put it right onto the wall without needing a frame. That's what I love about these canvases. You don't need a frame. One last little bit here. Still working my way forward, pushing up, bam, 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 bam. And the rest of this, I decided just fill it in. No big deal. I'm all about what's easiest. So it just needs to be dark so that the highlights will stand out. Lay in a little bit of a path. Same way, a little bit of the brown mixture. And then with a very light touch, grazing in highlights. Try not to overwork it. No, this is a little dark here. Little hard to see. Let's see about that. Here we go. Kaboom. One more little bit of zoom here. Getting that small little tree highlighted, and you can see a little bit more detail here. Now, here we go with highlighting this tree. Lots of little tappies making little frowns. Let there be some dark. And just creating all these little frown shapes as we work our way down. Believe it or not, that's the highlight of the tree I haven't yet made on the side. But eventually it'll be there. Couple more on this tree. So a lot more paint on the brush, and look at this little light touch. Pressing in and up, making a basic shape here. Notice how I just rock the brush a little bit to the sides, making it a little rounder. If you think of these bushes just like little half a basketball, like you cut a basketball or a globe in half, you just want to rotate your brush to make that little roundish half basketball shape and move on. Don't go over it too many times or things can get a little soupy, a little muddy. Let me move this a little bit over. There we go. There's a more of a rounded shape. What I like to say is like every tap should make like 100 little leafy shapes. Okay, if you keep hitting the same spots too many times, even just twice, all those little leaf shapes will just all melt together and it turns into mud. Oh, bringing this over just a little bit. Let's see about making the rest. There we go. Gentle little pushes. Making one or two bushes at a time. Don't get too greedy with it. Notice how I overlap the path just a touch. That pushes that path behind the bushes, gives a better sense of, say it with me, perspective. Oh, forgot a little dark right there. Throw it in super quick. There we go. Pulling through Sorry I didn't get too many palette shots there. Pulling through a little bit, and we're just going to make the grass effect with the 1-inch brush. Look how I keep moving and tapping. Let that color just get darker and darker as I continue to move towards the bottom of the canvas. It starts to dull as I run out of paint and I pick up the dark. It starts to fade the more you work it. That's how we do this, in little sections, little stages, so to speak. Let it fade away, reload the brush, and then overlap just a touch of that faded bit. We could have probably been done if we used the 2-inch brush. It just happens. Oh, and there we go. Look how fast we can do it. Boom. And back to what it looks like without the zoom. Show you how we finish the painting here just by tapping in some of the final bits of grass in the extreme foreground. And if you notice, I'm changing the angle a little bit. You can create a whole hill effect just that easy. Well, this was a happy birthday for Bob painting today. I hope you enjoyed this big old monster scene. I hope you stuck with it. I tried to be entertaining here, chatting with you for an hour and a half. Now I gotta do some final little details. And I have to come up with some new paintings. This was supposed to keep me going through next week, but now I got to come up and film some new paintings. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you like and subscribe, share it to your friends. I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care, all.